Larry, let's start with the current phase of the conflict in Ukraine. We've learned that Zelensky was talking about peace talks. He wanted to have some sort of negotiations with Russians. And on the other hand, we had an article in Bloomberg talking about that NATO is not capable of providing Ukraine with weapons and aid for years. When you see these two signs coming out of the Western Hemisphere, on the other hand, we've seen that there are 8 Patriot systems in Israel that they're going to send it to the United States and then go to Ukraine. How we can understand this type of behavior on the part of the West? Are they really, if you were a Russian policymaker in Russian Federation right now, how you can understand the situation right now with the West?
Well, I want to give an answer to that question that Colin Powell from time to time would give, and I from time to time would give about anybody trying to figure out the United States. We're so insane you can't. We do such convoluted and inexplicable things that we keep our enemies guessing all the time. Combine that with the fact that we're such an open society and there's so many sources that they can look at, they must be confused trying to figure out what the real purpose and aim of any kind of strategy or policy that the United States evinces. It's very difficult. But in these times, I think it's doubly difficult, if not more so, because as we saw, I think, at the debate, Trump and Biden, we aren't well led. And while you might say, well, okay, there's some kind of strategy behind all of this, I think that's a wrong statement. I don't think that covers the bases. I think we are strategyless. I think we are without strategy. We're without policy. We have a day-to-day policy. You know, the inbox has got 4 papers in it. Let's take care of these 4 papers. But we don't really have a forward outlook other than what has been expressed in the past. Pivot to China. The real threat is China. The real threat is in the Far East, not in Europe, not in the Levant, but we're in the Levant, head over heels in the Levant. We're head over heels in Ukraine, although we don't have any soldiers on the ground yet. So why would anyone in the world looking at us be able to calculate with any regularity or any accuracy what the hell our policy or strategy is? From day to day, we contravene the previous day or the previous week. So I have no idea what we're trying to do. I think, and this is going to be highly speculative, that both Zelensky and we have come to the conclusion that we need to shut this down. And we're probably having a debate right now over just what the timing should be. And what happened at the debates has thrown a real wrench into that. And I picked up a paper today and I saw what the Polish foreign minister had said. Let me read it to you. Poland's foreign minister, Radoslaw Sikorski, compared the United States to Marcus Aurelius's Rome when he couldn't find anyone to follow him. He said, let's see, he said, and this is the really salient part, it is important, he continued, to manage one's ride into the sunset. That's a direct quote from the Polish foreign minister. I think he summed it up quite well. We aren't managing either Biden's ride into the sunset or the American empire's ride into the sunset very well, if at all. It's like a hectic, helter-skelter mess. We go from one crisis to another one and back to the other one. But I do think I detect a weariness on the part of Zelensky and a weariness on the part of us. And if we get weary, Europe will get weary by state. And a reasonable look at things might present an opportunity for a ceasefire and a peace conference. And I hope that that's right. I hope that's a correct evaluation. Now, will it come before November? Who knows what is going to come before November? an implementation of the 25th Amendment and President Biden stepping down, or President Biden being, if he really is as bad as that debate performance indicated, then Joe Biden ought to have enough lucidity left to step down himself. And if that happens, the Democrats and the Republicans have different procedures for how they handle a situation like this. The Republicans just do it, they just pick somebody. But the Democrats, as I understand it, have to have a convention, or they have to have some kind of get together to say who's going to be the next candidate. Well, they need to get on with it if they're going to do something. And that's going to really consternate things between now and the election. It's going to make the focus even more on those circumstances rather than overseas. So if we're going to do something, then we need to put someone like Bill Burns in charge, or not Blinken, Bill Burns, someone who has competence at diplomacy, and we need to go ahead and do it. And we need to bring it to a close as fast as we can, because, as I said so many times, Ukrainians are dying, and more of Ukraine is being carved off. And this needs to stop. And if we're going to stop it, we don't need to delay the stopping, or at least the beginning of negotiations, because of our own domestic political problems. But I bet we will. So that's kind of all over the map, but I can't figure it out anymore. And this debate performance of the current sitting president just baffles me. I knew from watching him myself, I knew there were probably difficulties. Plus, I'm his age, and I know the difficulties I have, both in lucidity and brain power, and in getting around, even walking, lose my balance a lot and such. So I can empathize and sympathize with him, but I'm not president of the United States. Something needs to be done.
Larry, we've learned that Putin had a meeting with the permanent members of the Security Council in Russia, and they were talking about INF-3D. They were talking about intermediate and short-range missiles, and they were talking about Philippines, Europe. We know that the Trump administration is responsible for INF-3D. They just got out of this 3D. And in your opinion, what was the plan why they decided to do that?
That was probably, let me take you back to conversations with Colin Powell that I had in 1989, 1990, and they continued throughout our 16 years or so together. But I remember them vividly from those 2 years, because he'd just come from being deputy and national security advisor to Ronald Reagan. And he would talk about that experience with Reagan and Gorbachev and Bush as vice president, H.W. Bush, Shevardnadze and Kohl and Mitterrand and all that group, and what brilliant diplomats in their own ways each of those people was. And he would often talk about how things had come to a pass that was going to get increasingly difficult to deal with. And what he meant in those conversations, I learned later as we had them again and again and again, was this tortured relationship that the end of the Cold War was going to bring about with Europe, with Russia, with Germany and its reunification, with whomever Russia replaced Gorbachev with. And those conversations were, as I've said before, they were very euphoric. They were very hopeful. They were based on bringing Europe together, and Russia is a part of Europe, and making it truly whole once again. And frankly, from a security perspective, of having sort of a vice on the more volatile regions in Europe, which have been, I was reading Frankopan's book again. It's such a wonderful book. And I didn't realize that the Mongols were in Poland in 1240. So that place has been stomped on by empire after empire after empire. So holding that together between the vast continental state, Russia, and the vast and rich oceanic state, the United States. The old Mackinder theory, but bent a little bit to say, okay, here's the place where World War I was spawned, World War II was spawned. Let's keep all of this under control. It won't be the US in, Russia out, and Germany down anymore, but it will be Russia and the United States in condominium, more or less, kind of keeping everything in check. Well, we've let that go completely because what happened was we got presidents that decided it was more important to make Russia an enemy again. And I'm more and more convinced that this started with William Jefferson Clinton and his Secretary of State and others who despised Russia and wanted to find excuses and reasons to make Russia an enemy again. And now that has permeated the Democratic Party in particular, but the Republicans are right there with them too for different reasons, but they're right there with them. Lindsey Graham, for example, just hates Russia. That's what our foreign policy is. Our foreign policy is we hate Russia. And that's the greatest impediment, I think. And we've, to a certain extent, we've transmitted this poisonous, venomous attitude to Europeans, or at least to some of them, the current leadership, for example, which is going to be unseated very shortly, I think. So it remains to be seen what's going to come and replace it. But this is our attitude now. And so everything is being based on that disgust, that distaste, that hatred, really, a hatred for Russia. And Putin personifies that. We love in our country to make an enemy state, no matter how big, how great, how monstrous, or how small, the person in charge. And we like to vilify that person, whether it's Xi Jinping, or it's the Ayatollah, or it's Vladimir Putin. We like to make things in your face and personal. And so we've got Putin there. And Putin is venomous, and he's a snake, and he's a dog, and he's an autocrat, and he's an enemy of democracy, and all the things we throw out there. That constitutes our policy. So how do we, I'm a long way away to say, how do we back away from that? How do you get people in the leadership group? And what is the leadership group now? Is it Donald Trump and a throwout first act of all the civil service personnel working for the United States government? A reversion to pre-Ulysses S. Grant America? Or is it a continuation of this nonsense with a geriatric whatever in charge and no one really knowing where we're going at any given time? I don't know, but that's the most worrisome thing to me right now. I think the foreign minister's right. It may not quite be the apropos metaphor that we're Marcus Aurelius looking for a follower, but we are to a certain extent an empire whose day has dawned and gone. And we need to figure out how to make the best of that and not go out like many empires have in the past, kicking and screaming and dying in blood, but like Britain did, for example, to becoming a state that's still here. After all, we're big, we're rich still, even though we have $50.7 trillion of aggregate debt by 2034. In 2034, the interest payments on our debt, Nima, are going to equal, in combination, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and the defense budget. This year, the interest payments on our debt exceed the defense budget, $1 trillion. The reckoning is coming. Just as these people have pointed out, the reckoning is coming, not only for Joe Biden, but for the empire he somewhat leads. I don't know what that means for the rest of the world, but I will say that the rest of the world is not just adopting a multipolar attitude. It's adopting an attitude that says, you are an agent for chaos. Go away. We are developing our own systems, our own monetary and economic systems. We're developing our own security systems. We do not need you anymore. You are a danger to all of us, so go away. That's kind of the way I see the world developing right now. And we are odd man out.
Russians are talking about that Kiev was supplied with chemical and radioactive weapons capable of making a dirty nuclear bomb. And they're talking about there could be a false flag operation by Ukrainians. And with the current situation, do you find it that could happen when you see the behavior on the part of Ukrainians? How do you find it? Do you think that Ukrainian would do that?
I think to a certain extent, I find the behavior of Ukrainians, and have since 2002 and my closer relationships with them, to be not unlike the behavior of the neoconservatives, the more ardent amongst them in this country, which is to say, if I put the world in a state of destabilization, if I put states from Europe to the Levant against one another, if I start conflicts all over the globe, that helps me. That helps me because I'm the biggest guy on the block. I've got the biggest military, the most expensive military. I've got a regime that allows me to do things. I don't have any conscription or anything like that. I just have, volunteers for my military. And so I can really deal with a destabilized world. So let's destabilize it. I think that was Victoria Nuland's great emphasis within Ukraine. I think she didn't care a hang about Ukraine. She might as well have said not just, F you, the Europeans. She could have said F you, the Ukrainians, too, because she didn't care a thing about Ukraine except how it could exploit. She could exploit it, and the U.S. could exploit it to destabilize Europe. And that's what they want to do, is destabilize the entire globe if necessary. And because they think in that instability, there is protection for their friends like Israel, and there is great money to be made and great things to be done. They don't want a stable world. They don't want a stable economy. They don't want a stable, an equilibrium in the world. They don't want peace. They don't want anything that even resembles it. They want war, and they want constant war. And I think that's what we're dealing with right now. They are in the ascendancy, and that's what scares me about Donald Trump coming back. Not because he's that way. I couldn't tell you what Donald Trump is. Other than a charlatan and a crook and a bandit and a loan shark and you name it, I couldn't tell you what he is in terms of U.S. foreign policy or in terms of where we might go in the future under 4 or more years of his leadership. So that means what I have to worry about is what I had to worry about in the first term. And that's the people he brings in to be with him who are extremely of the type I just described. Let's destabilize everything. Just look at the Project 2025, which they're claiming they're going to implement. They're going to fire everyone in the civil service, and they're going to place them with their own people. Well, the first thing they're going to do, if the court system holds up in this country, is you're going to have thousands and thousands of lawsuits brought by these people who are fired, released, not in accordance with their contracts, with the civil service rules, or anything else. So that's chaos. That's chaos all across the land, as you have Republican judges upholding what he wants to do and throwing the cases out, and you have other judges actually implementing the law. So we could be in complete chaos. Well, what's going to happen when we're in complete domestic chaos? These people are going to run rabid. They're going to get what they want. They're going to do whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do, wherever they want to do it with the U.S. military. God forbid, with nuclear weapons. This is what scares me about the prospect of a Trump presidency. Chaos, because there are people in this country. I served with them from 2000 to 2005. I served cheek and jowl with them, who think the best philosophy for the American empire is keeping the world constantly destabilized.
These are those people who are responsible for withdrawing from INF Treaty, isn't it? It was Mike Pompeo, these people of this. How they can insert these people into his administration, in your opinion?
Well, these are people, again, Powell's greatest accomplishment, he said to me, and America's greatest accomplishment within the nuclear world was the INF Treaty. He said we got rid of an entire class of nuclear weapons, and the most dangerous class. And look what we did. And we brought it back so we could build these kinds of weapons again ourselves. So again, my point about these people believe in instability. They believe in destabilizing the planet. I'm waiting to see what their approach might be once we get really, really deeply into it, the climate crisis, because you talk about a premier destabilizer. That is going to be it. We did some games early on, simulations with the Germans, with the Chinese, with the Japanese, with the French, with the British, a number of nations, about 26 nations participated. This is some years ago, 2007 or so. And these simulations ran for 2 years. And each time we'd have a simulation, we would brief back into the next iteration. In other words, lessons learned, brief into the next one, then have another one, then have another one. And one of the scenarios we came up with happens about 2065. Granted, it was a worst case scenario, and we so labeled it, but it had 500 million people in the world, refugees, and they were moving basically from the south to the north. And the first decade or so, the northern powers, we call them the peer powers, they stretched, as you might imagine, from Tokyo all the way to Moscow to Beijing. They were running refugee camps, huge refugee camps, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people in each camp on their southern periphery. After about 10 years of that, they gave up, manned their southern borders, and started shooting people. And people have said to me when I described that to them, students and others, what do you mean 500 million refugees in the world? How could we have 500 million refugees in the world? I said, well, wait, we have 178 million right now, today. So getting to 500 million is not that much further. And look what's happening in the Mediterranean, for example. We had the Greek Coast Guard the other day accused of shooting people in the middle of the Mediterranean, or at minimum dumping them in the water and turning around and going away and letting them drown. That's going to happen in the future. So how are we going to deal with this kind of major instability, major chaos, if what we're doing now is making our strategy producing chaos, producing instability, so that we can make money off of it or whatever? This is not a way to confront the future. This is not. Putin is right. I don't know if he's serious. I do not know if he's sincere. And I don't know if he's reflecting Xi Jinping's attitude as well, or the leaders in Delhi, or the leaders in Brazil. I don't know if he's reflecting their attitude. I suspect with Lula he is, if this is an honest discourse he's having. Listen to his words when he speaks in English in particular, but I think the translators are pretty good too. He's talking about we should be working together. We should be cooperating. We should be colluding with one another. We should be collaborating. This is not a time in the planet's existence. This is not a place for competition that produces things like Ukraine or things like Gaza. The Israelis, the Jewish Israelis, are dead wrong, and they're going to be dead wrong. DEAD. They're losing right now, big time. And if they take Hezbollah on, they're going to lose even worse. And they're going to make us get into it and lose too. So this is not a time to be doing these things. These things are impediments to what we really need to do for the human race to survive on this planet. So you've got to do something about these things. And I hear Putin talking about these things the way I wish my own leaders would talk about them. Is it propaganda? Is it him just trying to win over other allies and friends in the world? I don't know. Look at what he's done in Chechnya. I mean, it was bloodthirsty in Chechnya before, but look at where it is now. And look at how Chechnya is acting as a magnet for Russia for what I would call good Muslims instead of bad Muslims, terrorists. So he's sort of setting up a profile for how we should be dealing with the future. Now, I realize he's invading Ukraine too, and that's certainly not a part of this kind of panoramic, but I think we forced him into that. We need to get on the same sheet of music with the principal leaders in the world, and we need to do it fairly quickly. And not just for economic reasons, that's part of it, but for the kinds of reasons we've just been talking about. Getting a handle on nuclear weapons and getting a handle on these conflicts, like what's going on in Sudan right now, that keep killing so many people.
we've learned that Prime Minister of India, Modi, his first visit after re-election will be to Russia. And on the other hand,
A signal there.
yeah, exactly. And how we know that there is a project, a big project between India, Iran, and Russia. It's called North-South Transportation Corridor. It goes from Russia to
Right,
Azerbaijan, Iran, and then India. It's huge. It's a huge project.
right out of Peter Farrakhan's the Silk Roads,
Yeah.
because that used to be one of the major trade conduits in the world, and they're just going to revive it, probably with some modern flourishes, maybe a few railroads, maybe some different passages with regard to the waterways that exist along there. That used to be one of the tremendous elements of the Persian Empire and the trade routes. We're going back to the past. And I remember the argument that took place, and Farrakhan covers this really, really cleverly. The argument that took place between those who were maritime and were making all kinds of money, because if you're maritime, you avoid all the taxes. You go from port to port, and only when you make port do you pay the taxes. So the Dutch, for example, would make sure they avoided most ports and they'd avoid most taxes. But when you go over land, you pretty much got to pay your taxes all along the way. So everybody thought the maritime would win out. Au contraire. The land people decided that they would get together and they would coordinate the tax rate, and they would make the tax rate very, very amenable to transportation and trade. Oh, before you know it, the maritime people were being put out of business. Think about the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea and all the attempts to create more passageways. The world will get along if people will leave it alone, like, those who want to fight in Ukraine and in Gaza and other places like that. It'll do its thing. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening with India. That's what's happening with Iran. That's what's happening with Russia. That's what's happening with China. And Putin went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for him to go to Manila and see what happens there. Yeah.
It's unbelievable, Larry, when you look at all these changes, tremendous changes that are happening at the same time. You see in the United States with the Biden administration, you see right now in Europe with these leaders, there is no understanding on what's going on right now. And Europe is the biggest loser of this conflict in Ukraine. And
Yes.
they don't seem to understand it.
Yes. And I'm not so sure that there aren't some people in the United States who intended that to happen. I'm not so sure there weren't some people in the United States who put us up to the Nord Stream 2 takedown. I'm not so sure that there aren't some commercial interests in the United States that didn't like 740 million Europeans building a GDP that equaled ours. And so this is their way of getting some recompense for that.
Yeah. Larry, considering that, how did you find the elections in France? We had the
Aha, Macron.
Macron, yeah.
It didn't work out quite the way he thought, I don't think.
We had a right wing in the first place, and the second place we had a left wing, and
Yeah.
Macron in the third place. What's your understanding? What's your interpretation of this race in France?
Well, I read an analysis, a quite well written one, analytically and politically, and it posited that Marie Le Pen is smarter than Macron, and that what she wanted was this sort of thing, and to put this young man in as prime minister. She doesn't want any kind of power at this particular point in time. She wants to be president if she's going to be anything, and work it until she can get to the point where she thinks she might have a chance to be president. And she felt like that Macron's mistake, as this article called it, was manna from heaven.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm watching. I'm looking at the EU elections and realizing that most Europeans don't care about the EU, Brussels, and so forth, unless they're taxing them or making some stupid, undemocratic decision regarding them. But and that's why their turnout is so low for those elections. But nonetheless, there is some indication there, I think, that we're going to have a real sea change in European leadership in key countries once they all hold their state elections. Germany being the one I'm watching most closely. Um, so I think that's going to be. We're having a webinar tomorrow with a Canadian group, and the webinar subject is the future of NATO, the past of NATO, the present of NATO, and the future of NATO. And one of the big questions is NATO a force for stability in the world, or has it outlived its usefulness? Or perhaps, as I'm going to say, it's a force for instability in the world. And I'm going to listen to all the different experts that will be assembled, but I'm more and more of a mind that it is an alliance of instability now, and will continue to be. And it started when it started going abroad into places like Afghanistan, Libya, and Iraq. But it is, I think, now a force for instability. So what do you replace it with? And that'll be the big end question, I'm sure. What do you replace it with? Well, I think Putin has better ideas than we do. The kind of things he's saying are the kinds of things that we ought to be doing. And for that matter, the kinds of things that Xi Jinping has taken to saying from time to time. It seems to me there are receptive leaders out there for what I'm talking about. And I don't care if they're autocrats. I don't care if they're dictators. I don't care if they're taking care of their people in the best way that they seem to think is feasible. And their people don't have any objections. And there aren't too many people in China that have any objections to the way China has improved over the last 20, 30 years since Deng Xiaoping sort of started it. I don't have any problem with them. This business about you having to be a liberal Democrat in order to belong to our order is nonsense, because we're anything but a liberal Democrat. We're the biggest hypocrite on the face of the earth with regard to liberal democracy. So let's get to it. Let's find a leader. Let's put him in there, her in there. I suspect it might be a her. And let's get to it. Let's join the world and do what we need to do, and do it in the way that it needs to be done. And the first thing, very first thing, is to get a nuclear weapons regime in place to defy all the people. Here's another group, this group in America that wants to back that niche industry, the nuclear industry, both the waste, which is very productive and makes billionaires, and the weapons making itself. They have a stranglehold on Washington, almost like AIPAC has a stranglehold on Washington and a stranglehold on the Congress. And they want to make more weapons and better weapons and bigger weapons and all the things that go along with that. We need to get a hold on that internally, domestically in the United States. And then we need to get a hold of the nuclear weapons regime in the world. And we need every one of the 9 nuclear weapon owning states, maybe 11 if Iran and Saudi Arabia come along. I say Iran and Saudi Arabia because I know Riyadh will get one 5 days after Iran tests, or they know they have one. So we need to get this back in check again, because that is the most immediate danger we all confront, is this blasé attitude, this laissez-faire attitude about nuclear weapons and about nuclear weapons treaties. And these treaties need to be as good or better than the regime we had before.
You mentioned the conflict in Gaza, but we've learned that Saudi Arabia has called on its citizens to leave Lebanon immediately. And it seems that,
Non-combatant evacuation operation, we call it.
yeah,
A
exactly.
non-combatant evacuation operation, a NEO, is the most clarifying signal about what a state thinks about another state and the potential for war there.
Yeah.
That's why we have never done a NEO from South Korea, for example, because that will tell the world we're going to war on the peninsula. Well, Saudis just did it vis-a-vis Lebanon.
Yeah. The question is, how capable is the Biden administration to stop Netanyahu from doing this?
It is not capable, and it's demonstrated that day after day, especially in the last week or two. I think the official position of the Biden administration right now is we do not want Israel to attack Lebanon. We do not want them to attack Lebanon, but we will be with them if they do. I think that's their position. And if they think that's persuasive with that snake in the grass called Bibi Netanyahu, then they're drinking some cheap stuff. Because he knows he has a lock. He's got 24 July, he's going to address a joint session of our Congress. I wouldn't be surprised if we weren't at war with Hezbollah by that time, and he's there begging for more and more and more and more. Air power. We need your air power. We need 3 carriers in the eastern end of the Mediterranean. We need around-the-clock operations against Hezbollah. We need your air power. And oh, by the way, next is Tehran.
Yeah. But Larry, if they go fighting Hezbollah and Iran doesn't come, Iran just let Hezbollah to fight by itself without getting involved directly into the conflict. And let's assume that the United States is not helping Israel. Nobody's helping Israel. Nobody's helping
Then
Hezbollah.
Israel is defeated majorly. Majorly. They are already defeated in Gaza. They are already defeated in a piece of land that is not even as big as the greater city of London. 600 square miles is the greater city of London, the city of Greater London. 140 square miles is Gaza. The IDF has been defeated in a piece of territory not as big as London. It's defeated. There's no question about it. So he has to deflect. He has to go somewhere else. He has to go somewhere else where he can continue to drop big bombs bought from the United States. Oh, no, given to him by the United States, and continue this war so that he does not have to admit that not only has he lost, when it's over with Hezbollah, he will not have a military left. There are reservists right now who are saying, go away. Do not call me up again.
Larry, before wrapping up this session, I want to talk about specifically the debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Many people are arguing that Donald Trump was good, his performance was nice, and he was doing everything, but we know that Joe Biden was unbelievably awful in this debate. That's why Donald Trump was shining, if he was shining, and there is a if there.
I thought they both stunk, frankly.
That's here comes
Trump, because he has nothing to say except idiocies, and Biden because he couldn't get his faculties together.
Yeah. The question is, Larry, when it comes to Biden, it seems that there is, right after I was watching CNN during this debate, right after this debate, the analysts in CNN, they were criticizing Biden, talking about he was a complete failure. He was so bad in this debate. And it seems that on the other hand, we see Democrats who are defending Joe Biden at this moment. It seems that there is a civil war within the Democratic Party going on.
I think so.
And nobody knows who's going to win. And at the end of the day, we know that Joe Biden is not going to, if Democratic Party is so concerned about the future, the party, they have to consider a replacement for Joe Biden. And here comes, how do you see the current situation in the Democratic Party?
I'll take you back to some days in the middle 60s when the Vietnam War was raging. We used to have a saying that all you had to do is turn an issue over to the Democrats to spoil it, to ruin it, to devastate it, to break it, to do whatever was negative, turn it over to the Democrats. If it were political, forget it. They'd mess it up every time. I think there's a lot of truth to that because there is a lack of leadership, real leadership, within the Democratic National Committee and within the Democratic leadership writ large. And that includes Schumer and Pelosi in the past and Steny Hoyer. Steny Hoyer, what did I hear about him the other day? 18 trips to Israel, and he hasn't been back to his constituents in Maryland but one time in that time. That'll give you the idea of Democrats. Republicans, on the other hand, and we always talked about this in the 60s and the 70s, Republicans had their act together. Republicans were businessmen like, businesswomen like. They knew how to act. They knew how to get things done. They knew how to make the trains run on time, so forth. Democrats arguing amongst each other all the time. I think a lot of that is true still. And I think the fact that they have not bred any new leadership under the age of 80 is really crippling them. And that they have people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, for example, who is nothing but an Israeli in the Democratic Party. That's all she is. I don't know if you saw Medea Benjamin embarrass the holy heck out of her the other day, but I was cheering Medea while she was doing it. They have lots of people like that. They have lots of people who are focused on other things than what they should be focused on. So it's very difficult to say who's a leader, who can come together and maybe find two or three other leaders and make a decision here. Very difficult to get that done. When Tim Kaine, my Virginia senator, was running for vice president with Hillary Clinton, you may remember, I said that's a disaster because Tim is not that kind of person. He's just not that kind of person, and he showed it in the one debate he did, and of course they both lost. The Democrats just do not know how to handle chaos and crisis, and they don't know how to handle problems within their own party that need to be either cut loose and done away with or fixed immediately. They just palaver about them. They talk, they consult, they talk, and they argue, and they fight each other. I saw this in Fairfax County when I was helping them with the election that Trump did finally lose to Biden. No help from me, but I did work in Fairfax County for that. And I was constantly amazed at how friendly they were, how nice they were, as opposed to Republicans who will eat your head off anytime they want to, but how disorganized they were and how they couldn't get anything done. Well, that's writ large now, I think. They're all in shock. Why should they be in shock? Have they not been watching the TV? Have they not been watching the performance of their president? Have they not been looking at the clips on TV and such? Have they not been paying any attention? Have none of them visited the Oval Office? Have none of them chatted with him or talked with him or whatever? Probably not, because as I understand it, he was really limiting the exposure he had to other people, especially the last 6 months, for obvious reasons now. So the Democratic Party's in chaos right now, just like it's in chaos every time something happens. They don't have leadership. They do not have leadership. So then what do you expect when they throw someone up to be president of the United States? Okay. This Bobby Kennedy's trying to take advantage of that because he knows how confused it is. He's been in the belly of the beast. He knows how confused it is. I don't agree with a lot of the things he says and does. I was asked at one point to talk with him. I didn't because he had just made some really cruel statements. And he was all hot for Netanyahu. And I couldn't possibly work for a person who was with Bibi Netanyahu and the massacre and genocide he's conducting in Gaza. But the Democrats are a mess. They're a mess.
And the problem, Larry, the other talking about Donald Trump, we talk about the INF Treaty, how he was responsible for that. And the people are thinking that if Donald Trump wins, he's gonna solve everything. It's unbelievable, this mindset, Larry.
Well, somebody walked into Donald Trump. This is my surmise. Somebody walked into Donald Trump. I don't remember exactly when it happened, but it would have been someone like John Bolton, or it could have been H.R. McMaster, or it could have been Jim Mattis. Someone walked in and said, Russia's got these missiles that look a lot like our Glickums did in the old days, ground launch cruise missiles with nuclear warheads. We don't have any of those anymore. Well, they can't have those kind of missiles because there's a treaty regime for them. Well, they're violating it. Don't you know they're violating it? They're violating it. They're violating it. I'll show you pictures of it. Okay. Trump said, all right, let's build them. Let's abrogate that treaty and let's build them. I mean, that's the way we do things, Nima. I've been there. I've been in those councils of government. I know that's the way we do things.